What's up YouTube, I'm Nathan, also known as Plasma Void. I know I said this was going to be a weekly show covering the previous week's news, but since we haven't had a show before, I need to go ahead and start from the beginning of the year. Fortunately, not too much that I want to talk about has happened, but if you feel I miss anything important, feel free to leave it in the comments. Let's start with the biggest piece of news, the Women's March on Washington. Now this was a response to President Trump's inauguration, although they started planning this back when he was first elected. This was a group worried about many of his claims and wanted to make sure that basic human rights weren't violated, which unfortunately was one of the policies he ran on. I want to go ahead and look at some of the response from Trump's own supporters to this march, who claimed that this march, which was about basic human rights, basic common sense, and equality for everyone. And their response was, this is against our candidate. Now, if your candidate is anti-common sense, anti-human rights, and you're not a Nazi, why did you vote for him? If anyone could answer that question, I'd be very happy to have the answer. But back on to what the march is doing. They had quite a large turnout, as anyone who's been keeping track of the news can verify. Almost 3 times what Trump supporters were able to send to his own inauguration. Now, considering this is a candidate who managed to, in less than a month, completely screw up one of the most basic tenets of being the president, and also failed to understand what Twitter is, I'm not surprised. Now, there are several reasons I shouldn't be going on about this too much. For one, I'm not an American. For another, I don't understand the mentality of putting 11,000 votes behind a dead gorilla for your president. He's not going to be able to run your country. Please don't try and vote for him. This goes for people voting for Harambe and Trump, but since one of you has already messed up worse than the other, it's somewhat of a moot point. But perhaps the biggest reason I shouldn't be on about this too much is that I just don't comprehend the two-party system. Giving yourselves 2 options and limiting it there feels like one of the worst ideas you could ever have. But I've gone off on too much of a tangent already. Going back to my original point, it's great to see that the Women's March has succeeded by as much as it has. Hopefully they only continue. Given the world we live in, peaceful protests remain one of the best options available to the world, assuming that no one is willing to go into armed revolutions. Now, I don't necessarily advocate for an armed revolution, but given how much America seems to be in love with the Second Amendment, which was specifically written for that reason, it surprises me that there aren't more armed militias getting ready. But I am quite grateful that the biggest protest so far has been peaceful, civilized human beings being responsible and mature adults, something that up until now has been rather lacking in Trump's policies. Hopefully I end up surprised by the end of his first term, but I will be honestly shocked, genuinely surprised even, if he manages to come off as a good person by the end of his first term. Rounding up this week's ways that Trump's government has managed to prove themselves idiots, alternative facts. Somehow they considered labeling falsehoods as alternative facts to be a good idea. If you're going to lie to your own people, at least make sure it's something they can't easily disprove. Although given what Trump's government might try to pull if they were competent enough to lie properly, maybe this is a good sign for the rest of us. On to a bit of lighter news though, because I don't want to talk about that for any length of time. Resident Evil 7's out. You can see a link below to one of my previous videos, where me and a couple friends go through the first hour, and I'm honestly genuinely happy to see a return to form and to true horror, rather than the jump scares that the game series has become. Now, I loved Resident Evil 5, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a horror game so much as it was a game featuring zombies. Hopefully with the return to a more atmospheric, high-tension style of horror, we can finally get out of jump scares being the only thing we ever seem to get in games. Continuing on with game news, because I don't really have any more political things to bring up, the Nintendo Switch event that was rather a disappointment. I want to believe in Nintendo, but given a lot of their recent decisions, that's becoming increasingly difficult to do. As much as I like the Switch, the lack of third-party developers really makes me believe this might be the last Nintendo console. I don't want it to come to that, but it might be better if Nintendo's properties, at least a few of the more mature ones, were given to other studios. Now, in order to end the week on something that isn't a complete downer, I'd like to bring attention to Pavonis Interactive, formerly Long War Studios. These guys were a group of mod developers who built one of the most interesting and, quite honestly, best full conversion mods for a game that I've ever seen. The Long War mod for XCOM Enemy Unknown and Enemy Within. Now, they recently released Long War 2 for XCOM 2. This can be a great tale for people who are in the mod development to see that, yes, I can get to a point where the game's developers take me seriously as part of a development studio, working on additional content for their game. It's great to see these guys' continued success. I look forward to trying out Long War 2 for the channel, and hopefully this is only the beginning of what they can show us. Because these guys are some of my favorite mod developers out there. It's great to see these guys getting the acclaim they deserve, both from 2K Games and Firaxis, as well as from the community at large. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's news. Thanks for watching. Remember to comment anything I missed. This weekend, I'll be starting up Long War 2 for the channel. Next week, we'll have more Resident Evil 7. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.